when will Retatrutide be available? So everyone's asking the same question, like, when can I get Retatrutide? And honestly, it might not be the best question to ask, because I'll tell you what's going on. To my knowledge, I don't work for Eli Lilly or anything like that, but it may change the context about how you're thinking about the next 6 to 18 months of your health. Because the number one thing is thinking about why you want Retatrutide in the first place. And probably somebody who, you want the facts, you don't want hype, you want health optimization. And you've heard so many good things about this from everyone online is talking about Retatrutide, but there's something more important, is what could you actually be doing right now instead of waiting for this compound or not having a great clinic who can get it to you. And I got to tell you, your metabolic dysfunction doesn't pause while the FDA processes paperwork. So let's get clear on the timeline, because what's most important is you finding out exactly what you want to accomplish in your health in the next 90 days that's going to give you 5 years of health progress. And then working towards that every single day, and you'll be shocked at the momentum you can generate. Because yes, I love peptides, and Retatrutide has been groundbreaking, to say the least. It's done an enormous amount of good for me and many others. But I can tell you that we've seen something really unique. And what stands out, they don't tolerate having poor lifestyle choices. They don't tolerate poor health. They don't tolerate the inability to sleep, the inability to perform physically. They don't tolerate pain. Those are the ones that create leverage in their health. And so many other great peptides that are available right now that can help you gain that leverage. And so for those of you who are like, hey, I'm somebody who wants to really optimize, well, the first place to start is get your labs ran and go to agelessfuture.com. My team will help you run one of the most comprehensive and thorough lab reviews you've ever had in your life. All right, so let's talk about Retatrutide and where it actually stands in development, because the picture is more specific than most coverage of this topic gives you. So Eli Lilly right now, they have 7 phase 3 clinical trials running under what they call the Triumph program. So 7 separate trials, each examining a different population or clinical question: metabolic disease, cardiovascular outcomes, liver disease, sleep apnea, osteoarthritis. So the scope is enormous. And what that actually tells you is the confidence that the company has in the molecule, but it also says that they're pretty smart, because then they can protect everything that it's got approval for and maybe sue more people. But Big Pharma would never do that. Let's talk about the Triumph Force data, which was completed December of 25. They reported 28.7% in mean body weight reduction. So that's a landmark number. It's unheard of. And it came with the safety profile and tolerability that gave the regulators a solid foundation to work with. So this triple agonist, Retatrutide, it delivered weight loss on average is just over 71 pounds, and along with substantial relief from osteoarthritic pain. And so what comes next? So Eli Lilly, they're going to compile a full phase 3 data package and file a new drug application or an NDA with the FDA based on trial completion times, typical preparation required for the NDA submission to the scientific community. People are expecting that to happen maybe quarter 4 of 26 or quarter 1 of 27. So the standard review period for the FDA is roughly 12 months. Maybe there'll be some kind of fast flow. Given the scale and the danger of metabolic disease, that burden on the United States, I think priority is going to be a real possibility. So maybe it would be fast flowed a little sooner than 18 months. Maybe this year, 6 to 12 months is my estimation, because if you think about obesity and metabolic disease, it affects over 100 million Americans, and the FDA has classified the designation specifically for drugs that address urgent unmet medical needs. And there's a compound showing 28+% of weight loss with broad downstream metabolic benefits. It makes it a compelling case. So that kind of puts the earliest realistic window for approval maybe in late 2027. And that's where the FDA is saying this drug is approved for clinical use. But the approval does not mean the same thing as available. And so there's this meaningful gap between FDA approval and the day a patient can actually get Retatrutide filled at a pharmacy. Now, if you're using peptides, there's a big difference between research use only peptides, not for human consumption, versus a peptide that is prescribed by a licensed medical provider from a 503A or 503B compounding pharmacy. Now, this is really important because while you can get some of these peptides, you want to make sure that you're getting them from a compounding source. And so Retatrutide, while they may be put on the drug shortage list initially when it comes out, there's compounding pharmacies that can help accelerate and keep the demand and supply balanced. So a lot of people see the announcement, they celebrate, and they're confused when 6 months later they can actually get the prescription. So let's walk through this gap, because first, there's a manufacturing scale up. So yes, of course, Big Pharma, they're phenomenal at manufacturing as long as they don't find like there's hairs in the product like what happened in the past. Unfortunately, Big Pharma, they claim that 503A compounding pharmacies, 503B, there's contamination, there's risky components. That's just not true. The same regulations, the same requirements for 503A and 503B compounding pharmacies, those exist so that you can have personalized medicine. Big Pharma exists to have a monopoly over the utilization and prescription of drugs. And yes, they have far more issues in having violations than most of the 503A compounding pharmacies that I've seen. There could be, if you think of the manufacturing capabilities, because of the demand for Retatrutide, there may be a massive spike in market demand for Retatrutide. And so these supply constraints, that's something that happened with tirzepatide and semaglutide in their early commercial phases. But Eli Lilly is being pretty smart, and they're making sure they've got all their bases covered. That's why they're trying to get so many indications to get this drug to market so they can protect their monopoly. But I agree that, yes, there needs to be some kind of ability to get a return on your investment because they put a lot of money into this. But at the same time, when we have such a health crisis in the United States where you're more likely to die of obesity than starvation, maybe there needs to be a little bit of understanding that there's other places that can compound these. And the interesting thing about a 503A is many people, if you have not done well on like semaglutide or tirzepatide, it's because the doses are dependent on exactly what was in the clinical trial. The variables are removed as much as possible. And when you remove the variables, you remove reality. And so what the 503A compounding pharmacies exist for is so that you and your doctor can establish something that's meaningful and a dosing that's usually far less than what shows up in the studies. And this is what we've seen in our clinic. I mean, we've worked with thousands of patients using GLP-1s, using other peptides like tesamorelin, like SS31. We've seen phenomenal results by using a much lower input because we're changing your lifestyle. We're cleaning up the signaling. That's where you're going to do best. So for those of you who love to go deeper and really want a personalized approach to your health, all you need to do is go to agelessfuture.com. Everything starts with testing. And through your testing, that's where we can predict where your future health will land. I'm Regan Archibald. I appreciate you being here.